The sound of slap echoed through the quiet village of Umati, followed immediately by the heavy thud of Adanna's body hitting the red earth. Obinna stood over her, his chest heaving, not with anger, but with the desperate, suffocating fear of a man whose dreams were slipping through his fingers. He looked at the dust on his only pair of shoes and then at the woman he had promised to marry. "I cannot stay here and rot, Adanna. Look at this place. The walls are weeping with dampness and the roof is a sieve. Do you want our children to inherit this poverty?" Adanna wiped the blood from her lip, her eyes shining with a resilience that moved him even in his fury. She didn't scream. She didn't hit him back. She reached into the folds of her wrapper and pulled out a small, tattered bundle of cloth. When she opened it, the afternoon sun caught the glint of pure, heavy gold. It was her mother's umbaji, the ancestral waist beads and bracelets that were the only thing of value her family owned. "Take it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Sell it in the city, register your company, buy your first suit. But Obinna, if you take this, you are taking my mother's soul with you. Do not let her down." Obinna fell to his knees, pulling Adanna into a fierce, desperate embrace. He kissed her with a hunger that tasted of dust and hope, his hands trembling as he held the gold. They stayed there on the ground for a long time, their bodies locked together in a silent pact, the heat of the sun reflecting off the metal that would either save them or destroy them. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications because this story will challenge everything you think you know about love and loyalty. Leave a like right now if you believe that a person's past should never be ashamed to shame them. 2 months later, the humid air of Lagos screamed with the sound of yellow buses and restless ambition. Obinna, now calling himself Obi, stood on the balcony of a cramped shared apartment in Surulere, clutching a cheap burner phone. He had sold the gold for more than he expected, but the city was eating the money faster than he could make it. Every night he called Adanna. "I miss the way you smell of sandalwood and wood smoke," he told her, his voice dropping to a low, seductive growl. "I close my eyes and I can feel your breath on my neck." On the other end of the line, miles away in the quiet village, Adanna would blush, pressing the phone to her ear. "Just come back successful, Obi. I am waiting for you. I am always waiting." But as the months bled into a year, the calls became shorter. The hunger in Obinna's voice was replaced by the cold, sharp edge of business. He had secured his first small contract, a renovation for a mid-level bank manager, and the taste of real money was more intoxicating than any kiss Adanna had ever given him. He started noticing how the women in Lagos walked, how their hair was straight and long, how their skin glowed with expensive oils, and how they looked at him with a predatory interest that made him feel like a king. It was at a high-stakes networking event on Victoria Island where the trajectory of his life shifted forever. He was wearing a custom-tailored navy suit, his hair perfectly groomed, looking every bit a rising mogul. He was reaching for a glass of champagne when a hand with long manicured nails, painted the color of dried blood, brushed against his. "A man who looks that focused is either very dangerous or very lonely," a voice purred. Obinna turned to find the Funaya standing there. She was a vision in a gold sequin dress that clung to her curves like a second skin. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and completely devoid of the innocence he was used to in the village. "I'm Obi," he said, his voice deeper than usual. "And I'm neither." Ifunaya laughed, a melodic practice sound. "We'll see about that." Before the night was over, they were in the back of her chauffeured car. Ifunaya didn't wait for him to speak. She leaned across the leather seat and kissed him with a calculated intensity that made his head spin. It wasn't the soft, sacrificial love of Adanna. It was a fire that demanded everything. Obinna felt a twinge of guilt, a fleeting image of Adanna standing in the rain back home, but he pushed it down. He wanted this world. He wanted Ifunaya. "Where are you from, Obi?" Ifunaya asked later that night, her head resting on his chest as they sat in her penthouse overlooking the Atlantic. Obinna hesitated. The truth, that his mother sold roasted corn and his fiancée was a farmer's daughter, felt like a death sentence to his social climbing. "My parents were diplomats," he lied, the words coming out surprisingly smooth. "They passed away in a crash years ago. I inherited a small estate and built my firm from the ground up. I don't like talking about the past." Ifunaya traced a circle around his nipple with her fingernail. "Good. I hate the past. It's the future that pays the bills. Within weeks, Obinna was a fixture in Ifunaya's world. She introduced him to developers, politicians, and fixers. His business tripled, then quadrupled. He moved into a luxury apartment in Lekki, and the letters from the village began to pile up, unopened, in a drawer. Adanna's voice on the phone now felt like a tether to a life he wanted to forget. One evening, she managed to get through to him. "Obi, I haven't heard from you for 3 weeks. Mama Nkechi is asking for you. She's not well." Obinna sighed, looking at his reflection in the gold-rimmed mirror. "Adanna, I'm in the middle of a massive deal. I don't have time for village drama right now. I'll send money." Adanna's heart cracked. "I don't want money, Obi. I want you. Do you remember what you said under the umati tree? Do you remember the gold?" Obinna's heart hardened. "That was another life, Adanna. Don't call this number again. I'll call you when I'm ready." He hung up and immediately blocked the contact. Ifunaya noticed his distraction. She walked into the room wearing nothing but a silk robe, holding 2 glasses of expensive wine. "Who was that?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. Obinna grabbed her waist and pulled her close, burying her face in her neck to avoid her gaze. "Just a persistent, distant relative looking for a handout," he said. "You know how they are once they hear you have made it." Ifunaya smiled, a cold, triumphant expression. "I do know. That's why you have to cut them off completely, Obi. You are a lion now. Lions don't play with goats." She kissed him then, a hard, possessive kiss that tasted of iron. As they moved towards the bed, Obinna's phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a message from a number he didn't recognize. He ignored it, lost in the heat of the moment, unaware that back in Umati, Adanna was staring at a positive pregnancy test, her world collapsing as she realized the man she had sacrificed everything for was officially a stranger. In the village, the shame was beginning to grow. Adanna's stomach was starting to swell, and without a husband or a public ceremony, the whispers were becoming shouts. "He has forgotten you," the elders told her, "using the city, eating the fat of the land, while you carry his burden in the dust." But Adanna didn't believe them, not fully. She remembered the way Obinna had looked at her when he took the gold. She believed that if she could just see him, if she could just touch his face, the spell of the city would break. She gathered the little money she had saved from her tailoring work and bought a one-way ticket to Lagos. She didn't have his new address, but she had the name of his company, Obilox Constructions. When she arrived in the city, the noise and the heat were overwhelming. She looked like a ghost in the gleaming lobby of the corporate tower where Obinna's office was. Her feet were dusty in her simple sandals, and her cheap cotton wrapper was frayed at the edges. The receptionist looked at her with blatant disgust. "I'm looking for Obinna, Obilox. I am his wife." The receptionist laughed, a sharp metallic sound. "Mr. Obi doesn't have a wife. He has a fiancée, and she's the daughter of a chief justice. You must be at the wrong building, sweetheart." Adanna felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. "I am not at the wrong building. Tell him Adanna is here. Tell him I have the gold." Before the receptionist could call security, the elevator doors slid open. Obinna stepped out, laughing at something Ifunaya was saying. He looked magnificent, powerful, wealthy, and completely unrecognizable. He stopped mid-sentence when his eyes met Adanna's. The world seemed to go silent. Ifunaya looked from Obinna to the pregnant, dusty woman standing in the lobby. "Obi, darling," Ifunaya whispered, her voice laced with poison. "Who is this village rat, and why is she staring at you like she's your last meal?" Obinna's face went pale. He could feel the eyes of his employees on him. He could see the judgment in Ifunaya's gaze. He had a choice. He could embrace the woman who had given him everything, or he could protect the lie that had made him a king. He looked Adanna directly in the eye, his expression turning to stone. "I told you people to stop coming here," he shouted, his voice echoing in the lobby. "I don't owe you anything. Security, take this woman out of here before she disturbs my clients again." Adanna gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. "Obinna, it's me. It's Adanna, your son. I am carrying your son."
Ifunanya stepped forward, her eyes flashing with malice. She reached out and shoved Adanna's shoulder. "Did you hear him? He said, 'Get out. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. We don't do charity here.'" As security grabbed Adanna's arms, she looked at Obinna one last time. He didn't look away, but he didn't help her either. He stood there, silent, as they dragged her toward the door. "The gold!" she screamed. "You are wearing my mother's gold on your finger, Obinna. God will judge you." If you are enjoying this emotional journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. We are just getting started with the escalation. What would you do if you were in Adanna's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. As the glass doors hissed shut behind Adanna, the silence in the lobby was heavy, broken only by the clicking of Ifunanya's designer heels as she paced around Obinna. "A son, Obi? A village rat claiming to carry your heir?" she asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous low hum. Obinna felt the sweat pooling under his expensive watch, the watch he had bought with his first major commission. "She's a local from my home area," he lied, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Ifunanya paused, her eyes searching his face for a flicker of the truth. Slowly, a smirk spread across her face. She reached out, gripping his chin firmly. "Good. Because if I ever find out you've been dragging your past into my future, I'll destroy you faster than I built you." She pulled him into a kiss that was cold and metallic, tasting of power and threats. Obinna leaned into it, desperate to drown out the sound of Adanna's screams that still echoed in the vents of the building. Out on the harsh, sun-drenched streets of Lagos, Adanna collapsed on a concrete curb. The city didn't care about her broken heart. The cars honked and the vendors shouted over her sobbing. She looked down at her hands, empty, trembling, and stained with the dust of a man who had traded his soul for a view of the ocean. "You denied you," she whispered to her belly, her voice thick with a new icy resolve. "You denied your blood." She spent that night at the motor park, sleeping on a wooden bench, clutching her stomach as the mosquitoes buzzed around her. She didn't cry anymore. The tears had dried into a mask of iron. The next morning, she didn't go back to the office. She went to the market. She sold her only remaining pair of silver earrings to buy a sewing kit and a small stock of fabric. If Obinna wanted to be a king in a palace of lies, she would be a queen in a house of truth. Months passed like a fever dream. In Lekki, Obinna's life was a whirlwind of champagne and deceit. He was preparing for the wedding of the year to Ifunanya, a ceremony designed to cement his status in the Lagos elite. But Ifunanya was changing. She became more demanding, insisting he sign over shares of his company to her as a gesture of trust. One evening, while Obinna was in the shower, he heard Ifunanya laughing on the balcony. He crept closer, the water still dripping from his skin. "Of course he doesn't know," she was saying into her phone, her voice dripping with mockery. "The fool thinks I'm pregnant with his child. I've been using the doctor I told you about. Once the marriage papers are signed and the miscarriage happens, I'll have half of Obilocks and we can move the funds to London. He's just a village boy with a shiny suit, Tunde. He was so easy to trap." Obinna froze, the cold air hitting his wet body. The betrayal was so sharp it physically hurt. He realized then that everything, the love, the success, the sophisticated Ifunanya, was a mirror image of his own deceit. He had lied about his past and she had lied about their future. He stepped out on the balcony, his face pale. "You are not pregnant," he whispered. Ifunanya spun around, her phone sliding into her silk pocket. She didn't look guilty. She looked bored. "Oh, please, Obi. Did you really think a woman like me would ruin my body for a man like you? We are partners in a business deal, nothing more. Put your clothes on and stop being dramatic. We have a gala to attend." She walked past him, her shoulder brushing his with a chilling indifference. While Obinna's world was rotting from the inside, Adanna's world was blooming. Back in Umuati, she had given birth to a boy with Obinna's eyes and her father's chin. She named him Chiemeka. She worked until her fingers bled, sewing wrappers and school uniforms for the villagers. She refused to take a single kobo from Obinna's mother, Mama Nkechi, who visited every day weeping with shame for her son. "He is dead to us," Adanna would say, her needle flying through the fabric. "This child has no father, only a mother who knows the price of gold." Her reputation grew. People from neighboring villages began to travel to see the woman who walked with such fierce dignity. She wasn't just a seamstress, she was a symbol of resilience. The escalation in Lagos hit its breaking point 3 days before the wedding. Obinna's lead architect burst into his office trembling. "Sir, the board of directors, they've seen the documents." Obinna looked up confused. "What documents?" The architect laid a file on the desk. It was a full investigation into Obinna's background, his real name, his mother's corn stall, and his abandoned fiancée in the village. Ifunanya had leaked it herself to force him into a corner where he would be entirely dependent on her for social survival. But she had miscalculated. The scandal was too big. The bank pulled their funding and the government contracts were frozen. Within 48 hours, the locks in Obilocks was gone. Ifunanya didn't stay for the funeral of his career. Obinna came home to find his apartment stripped. She had taken the jewelry, the cars, and even the gold-rimmed mirrors. A note sat on the kitchen island. "I don't marry losers. Don't look for me." Obinna sat on the floor of his empty living room, the same way he had sat in the dust of the village 2 years ago. He pulled the gold ring off his finger, the one he had made from Adanna's mother's jewelry. It felt heavy, like a shackle. He realized he had everything he thought he wanted, and he was more miserable than when he had nothing. He had traded a woman who would die for him, for a woman who wouldn't even look at him as he drowned. Driven by a mixture of desperation and a sudden burning need for air, Obinna packed a single bag with his old clothes, the ones he hadn't burnt. He got on a crowded, dusty bus back to the east. The journey was long, and every mile felt like a lash across his back. When the bus finally pulled into Mwati, the village looked smaller but more beautiful than he remembered. He walked down the red dirt path toward Adanna's house. He expected to find a woman broken by poverty. Instead, he found a bustling courtyard of women learning to sew and a young boy chasing a chicken in the yard. Adanna emerged from the house, draped in a vibrant green fabric she had woven herself. She stopped when she saw him. Obinna looked terrible. His expensive suit was wrinkled and stained, his eyes were sunken, and his spirit was shattered. He fell to his knees in the dirt, the same way he had sat when she gave him the gold. "Adanna," he choked out, his voice breaking. "I am a fool. I am a ghost. Please, I just want to see my son." Adanna didn't move. She didn't run to him and she didn't scream. She looked at him with a pity that was more painful than any slap. "Chiemeka," she called out. The little boy ran to her side, grabbing her hand. Adanna looked down at the child and then back at the man in the dirt. "This is your father," she said to the boy. "Look at him well, Chiemeka. This is what happens to a man who forgets where he planted his seeds." Obinna reached out a hand, but Adanna stepped back. "You can see him, Obinna. I am not a monster, but you will not live in this house. You will not sleep in my bed. You chose the city and the city spat you out. Now you must earn the right to even walk on this soil again." She turned her back on him and walked into her house, the sound of her sewing machine starting up like a heartbeat. Obinna stayed in the dirt for hours. Finally, understanding that forgiveness wasn't a gift you were given, it was a mountain you had to climb. Are you still with us? This story proves that the higher you climb on a ladder of lies, the harder they fall. If you believe Obinna deserves a second chance, type rebuild in the comments. If you think Adanna should never take him back, type resilience. And don't forget to tell us, where are you watching from? We love seeing our global community. Stay tuned for the final part of this journey. Subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss the conclusion of Obinna's redemption. Obinna took up residence in a dilapidated hut on the outskirts of the village, a structure even humbler than the one he had left years ago. He did not ask for help. He spent his days in the fields, his soft, city-bred hands blistering and bleeding as he cleared land for the elders. Every evening, he would walk to the edge of Adanna's compound and leave a small offering, sometimes a basket of yams, sometimes a handful of wild berries for Chiemeka. He never tried to force his way inside. He was learning the silent language of penance. Meanwhile, news reached the village through the radio and passing travelers that Ifunanya had been arrested in a high-profile sting operation at the Lagos airport, caught attempting to flee the country with fraudulent documents and stolen assets from several of her investors. Obinna listened to the news while sitting by a small fire, but he felt no joy in her downfall. He only felt a deep, cold shiver of realization at how close he had come to being shackled beside her in a prison cell. He looked at his scarred hands and realized they were cleaner now, covered in debt, than they had ever been while signing multi-million naira contracts in Lekki. One afternoon, a heavy tropical storm broke over Umuati. The rain fell in solid sheets, turning the paths into rivers of red mud. Through the deluge, Obinna saw a figure struggling near the village stream. It was Mama Nkechi, trying to rescue a stray goat that had become entangled in the rising brush. Without a thought for his own safety, Obinna sprinted into the torrent. He dived into the muddy water, his muscles straining against the current he once thought he was too big to fight. He hauled the animal to safety and carried his trembling mother back to her porch, shielding her from the wind with his own battered body. Adanna watched this from her window, her hand resting on Chiemeka's shoulder. She saw the way Obinna knelt at his mother's feet, not for the cameras or for show, but out of a raw, instinctive love he had suppressed for too long. The next day, the sun rose on a washed-clean village. Adanna walked out to the edge of her compound where Obinna stood waiting. For the first time, she didn't look at him for pity. She looked at him with an intense, searching curiosity. "Why are you still here, Obinna?" she asked, her voice soft against the morning breeze. "The city is still there. You still have your brain. You could go back and start again." Obinna shook his head, reaching into his pocket and pulling out the gold ring, the one made from her mother's jewelry. He placed it on the wooden fence between them. "I spent 2 years trying to build houses that would touch the sky, but I forgot to build a floor for my own soul to stand on. I don't want the sky anymore, Adanna. I just want the earth. I want to be the man who deserves to walk beside you, even if I have to spend the rest of my life walking in the dust." Adanna picked up the ring. She looked at the gold, then at him. "You cannot return to the past, Obinna. That man is dead. And the woman who gave you this gold, she is gone too. I am a different person now. I am a woman who owns her own life." She paused, and for the first time in years, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. "But I suppose every great house needs a strong foundation. And Chiemeka needs to know that a man is not defined by how much he makes, but by how much he is willing to carry." She didn't invite him into her bed, but she opened the gate. "The roof of the tailoring shed is leaking from the storm. If you truly want to build something, start there." Obinna stepped through the gate, his heart overflowing with a wealth that no bank in Lagos could ever hold. He picked up a hammer, the rhythm of his walk echoing through the courtyard, a steady, honest sound that spoke of a future built on the ruins of a selfish past. He knew the road to full forgiveness was long, but as Chiemeka ran over to hand him a nail, Obinna realized he was finally, truly home. Success was no longer a destination. It was the quiet, daily act of being present for the people who never stopped believing in the man he was supposed to be. We've reached the end of this powerful journey. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to start over. True love isn't about the gold you give, it's about the truth you keep. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Before you go, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We want to give a shout out to our viewers from every corner of the globe. Keep choosing real over fake, and we'll see you in the next story.